Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is our first episode in quite a long time, back with TV and Film Focused. And my first guest here today is Lance Karasti.
Hi.
So, Lance, boy, it's been an interesting lockdown for all of us.
Yeah.
But you actually, you had already started a script and had a production plan that had a number of people in it. More than one, and ended up sort of throwing that out the window when the lockdown came, and you came up with a whole new plan and ended up making your short film Hell.
Yeah.
Which I've seen and I think is very cool.
Oh, thank you.
Let's start with what your plan originally was.
Yeah.
Let's start there and then lead us into how you ended up.
Yeah, so I made two movies called Artificial and Hyperdark a couple years ago, and they were part of what I was calling the Simulation Trilogy, and that was a series of 3 movies that all took place in simulated worlds that were kind of connected to each other. And so about 2 years ago, we decided to start working on the third movie, and it was going to be called Mal, which was going to be about a society that understood they lived in a simulated reality and then received news that it was beginning to end or start to like break down. And it was going to be this giant movie. I was going to go for like 3 hours long. It was going to have a massive cast. We actually did an Indiegogo campaign and got starting funds to make it, so there was already money behind it. And we had done 1 day of shooting. We got one scene with some of the actors. It was one of the last scenes in the movie. And the pandemic happened. So I had to figure out a way to redo the entire movie, basically, because there was already money behind it. There was already an expectation that this was going to be made. So the idea of sitting around for, I mean, it's been 18 months now or 16, but we didn't even know how long this was going to be when it started. So the idea of just waiting for it to end wasn't really an option. So I thought that I could still make a movie in this world and still explore the same themes and the same cinematic ideas that I had been exploring before. So I had to think of a way to shoot a movie by myself. And that had already kind of been happening throughout the course of my last movies. Hyperdark had a cast and crew of 10 people total. And I did most of the camera work and audio for it, so we would just like set up all of the equipment, and then I would go in front of the camera with the actors, and we would improvise. And so I thought I could probably do that for this new movie. I could probably still do that, but who would I improvise with? It wouldn't be very interesting to just have me by myself on screen. I don't know if I could tell an interesting story that way, but I decided I wanted to do a doppelganger story, so it wouldn't just be me by myself, I'd be interacting with myself. So I figured out a method so I could actually do improv, where I would like improvise half the dialogue, and then I would go onto the other side of the screen and then improvise all the reactions or the other half. So I could still do this like improvisational workflow that I had been developing, and I could still actually do all of the same kind of shots and style I'd been developing. On Hyperdark, the camera never moved. That was just an intentional stylistic choice. But it also meant you didn't need to have like 3 people behind the camera to make it move, so it kind of cut down on costs and the amount of people you need. So for this movie, for Hell, it worked perfectly. I could just kind of continue and push forward with all of the techniques and ideas we've been developing. And yeah, that was the idea, was to just finish the trilogy, make a movie during this time. And I kind of looked at it as a challenge. Like, how could I make this movie by myself? And yeah, that's kind of what led us to here.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've seen the movie, and you did some really interesting things with the whole doppelganger thing and the just the transitions you did and the some of the using kind of the natural environment to help create those transitions. So did you kind of script this movie, or did you decide you were going to improvise mostly?
So I wanted to do like an outline or a script, but because of how long the production was, I shot pretty much the entire pandemic, so multiple seasons and stuff. I would just get so many new ideas, and I would start to hate older ideas in such like a fast amount of time that writing them down even wasn't really working. And when I got on to like when I would go to the location for that day, I would just kind of go wander around and find a place that seemed appropriate to shoot, and I would just come up with new scenes on the spot. So it stopped making sense to like try to actually write a script. And so the entire movie was mostly improvised, but what would happen is I would get like ideas for interesting special effects shots or cool location shots or just even like 10-second snippets, and I would go out and just shoot those. And so what ended up happening is my editing timeline got filled up with all of these like sections that I knew I wanted, these images and effects, but there'd be nothing between them. So like a natural outline started to form where I would spend like weeks and months just thinking about like what needed to get from like point A to B in the editing timeline, like what needed to be between the two shots I'd already gotten. So kind of going in without any idea what I was doing, an idea does develop over time. And I originally wanted it to be like over an hour long. I was going to go for 90 minutes, but what happened was I didn't anticipate just how like hard this was actually going to be. So like shooting by myself means...
Oh, but I hate to interrupt you, but yeah. I just want you to know there's some construction going on upstairs. So if you periodically hear noises,
sure,
do not be alarmed.
All right, I'll try.
That is supposed to happen.
Okay. Yeah, so I didn't anticipate how hard this was going to actually be filming it by myself, because I would have to go and like run in front of the camera, but then I'd have to do it like 4 more times just for that take, and then for each one of me you see on there, I'd have to go out and do multiple takes for that one, never cutting, because if you cut, then the lighting changes, the sun moves, so I'd have to do everything as fast as possible, where I'd be sprinting around. Yeah, I'd be like sprinting around like crazy in front of this camera, or just rolling off improvisational lines to myself, and by the time I'd get done with a shot, an hour would have gone by and I was exhausted, and I found myself just laying on the trail for like 20 minutes after every shoot, just like completely out of breath and sweating. I was so out of shape too because it was a pandemic, so I would be inside for like a month and go out for one day where I would sprint all day in like heavy clothing, and it was a nightmare. But yeah, by the end of it, I realized I had enough footage for a 2.5-hour movie, but the problem was I had to stack it all on top of each other to make the effects of me like running around. So it ended up being like a 40-minute movie, about half the length I actually wanted, but it's because the amount of material I would actually have to shoot would be 4 to 8 times as much as a normal movie to make that happen. And
yeah,
without a casting crew, that just wasn't an option. But I also realized too, like for the material and for what I was trying to say and show, I don't think going for longer than 40 minutes would have been good, and hopefully, I've been told this, but hopefully the length works for people and it keeps them interested, because I really like slower work, and I like movies that are more of a slow burn and kind of meditative, or at least I like making movies that way. I like all kinds of movies, but so far what I've been doing has been sort of heading in the direction of more of slow cinema, and for that, a lot of those movies can be like gargantuan monsters. They're like 3 to 4 hours long sometimes, and I like that too, but I also have a spacey mind, and I can't quite tune in, and I end up watching those movies in like 40-minute increments anyway. So
right.
For me, this is like the ultimate version of what I would do with that kind of movie, what I would want out of it. It's there's sections in it that are slower, but because of how short it is, I feel like it can encourage an audience to give it more of a chance and to not feel anxiety that they're losing time or whatever, or giving something to a project that might not give them anything. It's they're more willing to take the risk that they're gonna get something out of it. So I really like that the length that it turned out to be.
Yeah, well, as I said, I watched the film, and I felt fully engaged for the entire 45 minutes or 43 or whatever it is.
Thank you.
I didn't lose interest in it, and I was really, that's an interesting sound. Does that sound like a flute to you? Because that sounds a little like a flute, and I know it's not.
It almost sounded like the crying baby from Eraserhead. That was really weird sounding to me, yeah.
Sorry, Jim. So anyway, I do want to talk about, now, so do you consider this, what you've created in Hell, the short film, do you consider that the third in the trilogy, or is the third still coming because you didn't quite get to go there?
So this is really hard for me, because I've kind of planned out the next decade of movies I want to make, because I've looked at the last 10 years and what I was able to make, and I've made about 4 movies now, and it could have been 5, but one got canceled halfway through just because it was not up to par, and I wanted to keep improving. But now I've reached a point where it's like I kind of know what I need to do for certain levels of quality, and I kind of feel like a race against the clock is coming, because I have all these movies and ideas I want to make, and I want to act in a lot of them too. So there is, it relies on me being like a certain age for a lot of it too. So I kind of feel a race against the clock, and I have a lot of movie ideas that could still take place in a simulation, and I've thought about just abandoning the idea of it being a trilogy altogether and just kind of saying, well, all of my movies could kind of be in different simulations. And there's kind of an idea that I look at movies themselves or art itself as a simulation. It's kind of like we're simulating life in a way, emotions, things we can't just see or look at a lot of the time. And so to me, it made sense to just have the movies themselves take place in a simulated reality, because it allowed me to do a lot more with the cinematography and the plot and stuff that you wouldn't see in normal movies. I could kind of get more abstract and surreal. I don't see myself fully abandoning these ideas, but over the next 10 years, a lot of the movies I'm going to make are going to be more crowd pleasers, hopefully, more genre-based, things that I can explain. The things I liked about these last couple movies I worked on, Hyperdark and Hell specifically, is I was kind of going for this thing where when you watch it, you could understand what was happening, but if somebody asked you to explain what was happening, you might be lost for words. I really enjoyed making work like that, but I also want to start making work where you can just explain it to people and they go, oh, that's interesting, I'd like to go see that, and then, give me money, hopefully, is the idea.
Yeah.
But also, I just want to start making work that is less personal. I called Hell a self-portrait because it was something I made by myself over the pandemic, and it really is about me working through what I was going through during the pandemic. And a lot of my work has been therapeutic up until this point, which is, I would say, is part of the simulation trilogy. It's like a main theme that's been going on, is that it's the simulation of my mind is kind of being shown in these movies. I'm kind of simulating what's going on in my head is the idea. That's kind of why I've been calling it that. But I definitely still want to keep making movies in this realm, so I don't know if trilogy is an appropriate word anymore. Maybe like a decology or something, like
Yeah,
get 10 movies in there or something.
Yeah.
A decalogue. But I definitely want to start moving away from how abstract it's been so far. But there's definitely, I would say the next 2 movies are going to be more genre-based. I want to do a comedy. This fall is what we're going to be working on. And then the fall after, I'd like to do a horror movie if things line up for that. But I will say, over this plan of the next 10 years of movies, there is one movie that could be a fourth, I guess, in this, I guess not trilogy anymore, but a fourth movie. I feel like Artificial, the first movie I made in this, was kind of it's a finished movie, but it almost feels like a first draft to a type of movie I wanted to make and just couldn't quite do then. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, in like 5 to 10 years, I'd like to make a sequel to that probably, or like a stealth sequel where it's like, you don't have to know that Artificial exists, but if you did, this movie would have a lot in it that connects to it. Mm-hmm. So the idea, I think, is to work, I guess the career trajectory I have in mind is to kind of move away from abstract self-portraitures and start creating more cultural critiques and not mainstream, but crowd-pleasing genre films more.
Sure.
Try to get more messages out to larger groups of people, but eventually bring it back to a larger budget, bigger, better version of these smaller movies I've been making one day, and hopefully share that with a larger audience that I've been able to cultivate. You also asked about if I considered a short film or a feature length, or maybe hinted at that because it's 40 minutes.
Right.
I've stopped kind of caring about the distinctions of like content, as people call it now, because
Sure.
things can end up on the internet, they can end up in theaters, they can end up on TV, and they can just switch places arbitrarily. So we're in a place now where a mini-series and a short film or a feature film can be the same thing if you divide it up. And I really like that, because for me, adding labels and genre define can get really difficult and controlling for the stuff I've been making. So when I made this and I got it done at 40 minutes, I decided that was kind of perfect, because what I like to do is ride that line where you're not sure how to describe something. And so depending on the film festival, a feature film is 40 minutes and above, and a short film is 40 minutes or lower. or most film festivals, I think it's 50 minutes and above, and a short film is 40 minutes and lower. So if you make something between 40 and 50 minutes long, you hit a dead zone where you can't actually submit that project to different festivals. But I didn't care about that because I knew I was going to release this the second it was done. I wanted to just get it out there and have people experiencing it and hopefully relate to it during this time because it's about this time, and I feel like a lot of people have just been locked inside and trapped in their own minds. And so
Yeah.
I really just wanted to get this out right away. So the idea of even worrying if it was a feature length or a short film didn't matter to me. It could be both. It's a 40-minute movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not going to places, it's not going to theaters or festivals that would need that definition.
Right.
So I don't know, it's kind of an interesting time where you can make media that defies, like, I don't know, definition.
I agree. I think this is one of the most exciting times for the very reason that you cited, which is, you know, you can make a short film, you can make you know, in terms of length, you can make a short film, a feature film, an episodic, and then they just hack it up in different ways for different mediums. So you can just make what you want.
Right.
You can tell the story you want in the amount of time you want to tell it, and let somebody else worry about, you know, how to make it fit into their, you know, their format. You know what I mean?
Right, and I would say for the budget level and the experience level that I'm at too, people don't know who I am, right? You can't like put my name on a poster and then random people go, oh, let's go see that. That doesn't happen. So I have to figure out ways to get people to come see my stuff where they will be more willing to give a chance and risk losing time. And that's a big ask for a lot of people. Most people won't click on a 10-minute YouTube video you send them. That's too much for them.
Right.
That's hard. And if they're searching through movies, a lot of people will spend their whole night just searching through Netflix, and they'll never select a movie, and that's all they do.
I know.
So it's hard to get people to just even click on the thing that's free and made for them. So I feel like working on this level, shorter is better. And I've been advocating for, if you're making movies for under like $20K and in this budget level, a lot of people define it differently. I call it minimalistic filmmaking, I think, where it's it implies a choice. Like maybe I can't choose my budget, but I can choose what I'm showing, and less is more, and what I'm putting on the screen versus what I'm not is an important distinction that can create meaning. But for minimalistic filmmaking, I think that going an hour length is like perfect. Like if you're making a movie for this amount of money, and then somebody comes and wants to see, goes to a film fest or goes on YouTube and tries to find it, they see 90 minutes, 2 hours, they're gonna click off in the first 10 seconds if they're even wondering like if it's gonna be bad. That's a lot of time. People will put on movies made for millions of dollars and click off in the first 2 minutes. So
Yeah.
I feel like, especially if you're an unknown and you're making money on a low level, I think hitting that hour mark is important, or trying to, or at least ignoring the idea of making the 90-minute movie. I think that's kind of obsolete now.
I agree.
And a lot of the stories I feel like I've been seen told in this budget level, or told with minimalistic filmmaking, are they don't need 90 minutes. There's advantages and ways we can like break the form now where we don't need to strictly follow 3-act structure. It's not that, I mean, Hell has kind of a first act. It's kind of got labeled acts, but one of the ideas behind it was to skip a first act altogether and to just start into the second act. Because I realized if I'm the character and people are going to watch it, and they don't need to know my backstory, basically. They can figure it out from like the first 3-minute shot or whatever, the first shot of my face or whatever. You just have to like look at what's going on, and you can figure out enough context, and that kind of fits into the minimalism thing, where it's like, why do I need 10 minutes of opening to establish character when what I'm trying to do is a little more nuanced than just like having you follow a character around. It doesn't really make sense for me to follow a lot of the guidelines that were taught in film school and stuff like that, but it makes a lot of sense to understand them, because when you break them, it creates a lot of psychological effects, and you need to really know what they're going to be. Otherwise, you might just turn people off completely.
Right. Well, and I think it's a great. I was delighted to see that you got this out in time when the feeling of the pandemic was still with us. I mean, now that feeling has lightened up a little bit.
Yeah.
People have a little spring in their step. You can walk around without a mask and not be, worried about it.
Right.
But I was really thrilled to see that you did this movie with the intent of exploring your mental state in that shut down.
Yeah.
Which I wish a lot more people, wish we had a lot more of that, because I think that's a tremendously interesting area.
Yeah, I'm hoping to find more art that was made during this time. I know a lot of people they just want to ignore it and get away from it, but for me, I like dwelling, I like thinking, I like learning, and I really want to know what other people made during this time. There's got to be a lot of stuff that's going to come out soon, or stuff that might already be out that's just going to be harder to find, and
Right.
specifically from unknowns is what I'm interested in too. I really want to know just what the person we don't know, how they're communicating themselves, and yeah.
Well, and letting yourself go to a little bit of a negative place, you know? People are afraid to go there, you know? And I thought it was really refreshing to just, you know, to have you be willing to acknowledge that, you know, that it can be dark, you know?
Yeah, there's a trigger warning at the start of this movie, and it's there because if you fall under it, if you are feeling like suicidal or depressed, you shouldn't watch it, because it's an exploration in depression. And for some people, though, if they know who they are, that can be helpful. It can be helpful to process, and it can be helpful to learn. And it was helpful for me to make it and to express it. But there are people where if you're watching it, you probably just shouldn't. And hopefully that the first 3 minutes will tell you everything you need to know. Like, you can just bail then. It's not a big deal. And that trigger warning, too, was there's a lot of debate about whether art should have that or movies should have that. And it's hard because I see kind of both sides of it. I see the idea that it's like, I mean, for me personally, it's like, it sounds so not important compared to what it can do, the power of it. But like, I look at it and go, well, I'm like, am I going to label all the themes of my movie ahead of time now, or am I going to give something away? I don't advertise my movies that much at all. I like to keep them very secretive. So the idea of even starting them with like a list of like, here's what to look out for is like kind of scary to me. But I thought I think I was taught this in film school, but every limitation is a chance to be creative is what I was taught. And so I looked at it as, well, how can I be creative with this? How can I further express the themes and stories with it? So I think it says something like, graphic depictions of self-harm for the trigger warning, and something about me liked the idea that that was actually a pun, self-harm, because the movie is about me chasing myself around and like hurting myself. And, I don't know, it worked with the theme of the movie. Just the idea that it says self-harm and then right after it says self-portrait is, I don't know, it's something I liked, and so I think it's something I'm going to keep doing in my movies too, and finding ways to be creative about. And like I said, this is a movie that, for me, helped me process the depression of the pandemic, and helped me process being stuck inside, being afraid to go outside, being afraid of others, being locked in my mind and just kind of analyzing myself and going in circles with myself and having the same conversation every day. And it's good for me to process that, but a lot of people might not be ready to. So that's why that's there. And if you are ready, though, I hope it helps. Yeah.
I would think that it would.
Yeah.
You know, you know, certainly there were challenging moments in the pandemic for everyone in a variety of ways. But I think you made the right choice because I think there are people who are in an extremely delicate position, in an extremely delicate state, and I think giving them the opportunity to bail if they want to. I think in the context of this movie, I think was a good idea. Yeah,
I mean, the worst thing that I think any movie I could make that it could do is cause harm, and that's the opposite of what art is for me. It's a way to, it's therapy for me. It's a way to entertain others. It's a way to express and communicate, and to have it do harm, I think, would just be the opposite of its intended function. A lot of people believe in suffering for their art and stuff, and there was no doubt some suffering that went into this, but it wasn't like a choice, you know, and if you can choose to not suffer, that's the choice you should make. Your art won't be better because you're suffering. It was just harder. It was harder to get outside. There were multiple days I wanted to go film, and I just couldn't, and I just didn't. And
you couldn't because the weather was bad? You couldn't because you just didn't have the stamina?
I just didn't have it.
Didn't have the oomph.
That happened a lot of times, and it's fine because I was making this over a year and a half, but you can't do that on a major movie. You can't do that with a normal schedule. But this was it was nice. But yeah, so like I was saying, it's really interesting to find what people made during this time also, but people shouldn't feel bad if they didn't make anything, because this is all I had to do. I didn't have a job. I already had this paid for. It was already on the runway to be made. It was set up. I don't know if I didn't have a project to work on. I don't know if I could say I was going to start with a blank page and just make something out of nothing during the time. So I was very fortunate that there was already a path for me before it started. So yeah, if you didn't make anything during the pandemic, don't feel bad about that. Make something after. You made it. You're alive. Celebrate and relax.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I got very lucky. I didn't plan on any of this happening, and it really saved me in a lot of ways. I don't know what would have quite happened if I didn't have a way to channel all of this into something productive and creative.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, definitely a healthier outlet for your internal angst than just letting it roll around and, eat your brain from the inside.
Yeah, a lot of people ask the question, "Are you okay after this?" And that happens after a lot of people. It's like kind of a joke. Like, people make a movie about depression or something like that, and that's always the question is like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
And the answer was like, "No, there's a pandemic. Like, what are you talking about? No one's okay."
Yeah.
I guess I will be. We're getting out of it, but and I feel okay now.
Yeah.
But I made the movie to be okay is the thing. It's a dark movie, and there isn't. I'm willing to spoil this part, but there isn't a retribution in it, There isn't a sun coming up and there's a realization that, oh, I should have just been whatever. There isn't something to figure out in the movie. It is a meditation of sadness and angst and depression. And,
Right.
And it definitely is not for everybody, and it might not be for everybody during this time, but I really, really wanted to make, it's weird, I can't even say I wanted to make something about this time. It just kind of happened. I was already making the movie, and I got kind of forced to finish it, and this is just kind of what came out. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I really like it, because to me that's the ultimate way to make art, is to not even plan it, to just have it pour out of you because it had to, and it was an extreme time, and so I feel very fortunate that this is what happened with me. But yeah, now it's time to start making stuff in the other direction, hopefully.
Right. So you had some backing. You did the Indiegogo thing to make your original version of what was coming.
Yeah.
So are those folks going to stick with you think? Have you shared the film? I mean, obviously you've released it now, so hopefully those folks have seen it.
Yeah, they all seem to love it.
Yeah.
I would say this is the best reception of any project I've put out there.
Well, that's interesting.
People, it's hard because after a festival, after a showing, people are really excited and they want to just gush about stuff. But this didn't have a public showing, so people had to sit with it by themselves for a while, and which is probably the best way for this to be shown. And to think about it. And so I've been receiving messages and emails, and there's been some public comments and stuff where people are saying it really did help them and they really could connect with it. And some people said they just involuntarily cried the whole time, but they also enjoyed doing that. And
that's
it's processing.
That it seems to me that you've achieved what art is supposed to do.
Thank you.
If art is to help, is to reflect life and what people are going through at a moment in time, and this is certainly a moment in history we'll never forget.
Yeah.
Those of us who experienced it. So I'm excited to see what's coming next for you. And congratulations on actually getting a product out there.
Thank you.
I worked on a pitch deck during the pandemic because I was home.
Yeah.
But actually getting a film shot is cool, even if it's only has you in it. It's still great.
Thank you.
So I can't wait to see what you do next.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for being, it'll be a surprise to all of us, including you. Thanks for being here, Lance.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And we'll see you next time on TV and Film Focus.